Hello, my lovely anatomists and physiologists. Michele Glass here. We're back with chapter 6. We're still talking about how the bone is formed. And what we're talking about in this video is bone elongation, making that bone longer. So you should consider that this is happening during fetal development. This is happening in the infant. This is happening in the toddler. This is happening in a school-age child. This is happening in puberty. And then it stops about mid to late 20s. So depending on the individual, depending on the hormones in that person's body, this bone elongation, when we're thinking about long bones and achieving a final height, that's usually finished, somewhere maybe in the range of ages 16 to 21 or so. And then bone finishing, so bones such as sternum and pelvic coxal bones, those might not really be done until kind of mid to late 20s. And then we see that the skeleton is finished, it's mature, but changing throughout all of life. So when we're talking about bone elongation, we are talking about increasing in length. And if we are increasing in length, then that means we still have present the epiphyseal plate, or you can call it the epiphyseal cartilage. And this is that area of hyaline cartilage that we find at the metaphysis. So you can actually use an x-ray to see, if that epiphyseal plate is still present, to see if an individual has finished growing. So this might be significant if there's question about a person prematurely finishing their growth, or if a person seems to be continuing to grow past that sort of average window of, between ages 16 to 21. And what we can think about here, I'm going to do my lovely drawing of an epiphysis. So I'm going to draw the shaft of my bone, my diaphysis. Let me just label that diaphysis. And then I'm going to sort of make like a rounded end here to represent my epiphysis, sort of like in this way. And what we can sort of do here is maybe make this section kind of sort of in the middle, sort of closer to the diaphysis. And let's label this area the metaphysis. So this is, of course, going to be also the epiphyseal plate or the epiphyseal cartilage. Now, what we'll be seeing is this portion right here is going to be making cartilage. So the portion of the metaphysis or epiphyseal plate that's closest to the epiphysis is where the cartilage is being formed, and the area closest to the diaphysis is where we're getting the replaced with bone section. So let's think about this epiphyseal plate a little bit more, and then we can add some details. So what we will see is this epiphyseal plate can be divided up into 4 zones. And so we have the outermost is the reserve zone. Going deeper, we have the proliferative zone. Beneath that, we have the zone of maturation and hypertrophy. And then the innermost zone closest to the diaphysis is called the calcified matrix zone. So we have at the very top, closest to the epiphysis, the reserve zone. Moving deeper, we have proliferative zone. Moving deeper, we have zone of maturation and hypertrophy. And then closest to the diaphysis, we have this calcified matrix. In the reserve zone, this is where we're going to have small chondrocytes. Remember, chondrocytes are cartilage producing cells. And this is going to actually secure the epiphyseal plate to the bone. The next layer is the proliferative zone, and this is where you're actually actively doing mitosis to make new chondrocytes. And then as we move into the zone of maturation and hypertrophy, this is where we have older and larger chondrocytes. And as we get into the calcified matrix, we have chondrocytes are dead. We have that calcified matrix. We get capillaries and osteoblasts. From the diaphysis penetrating. And so again, what we're looking at here is the presence of the epiphyseal plate or the presence of the epiphyseal cartilage indicates growth is happening. And the growth is happening because we're constantly building cartilage and then converting that cartilage to bone, constantly building cartilage and then converting that cartilage to bone, constantly building cartilage and then converting that cartilage to bone. And remember, this would happen at both the proximal and the distal end so that you're elongating that bone. What we really see is that our bone grows in length. Bone grows in length when osseous tissue, so we'll just say bone or osseous tissue, is added to the diaphysis. So notice that it's the blood vessel and it's the osteoblast from the diaphysis that's like penetrating into that calcified matrix, converting that to bone. So you're adding to the diaphysis and then you're creating more cartilage and then you're adding to that diaphysis and so forth. Now, all of this kind of growth and development is regulated by hormones. So it's regulated by hormones, and we'll talk more about these in a separate video, but we'll see growth hormone being important here. And growth hormone we'll see has an abbreviation of GH. We have the hormone thyroxine important here, and you should really think about these as like, I'm going to say This may be a super simplification, but I'm going to do it. I'm going to say all the time, meaning growth hormone and thyroxine are hormones that are being released throughout our life. They have different effects depending on where our body is in its development. But the growth hormone and that thyroxine are going to coordinate those changes from infancy, toddlerhood, childhood, and continuing into pubescence and adulthood. But we'll see at puberty that is the hormones of estrogen and testosterone. Oh my goodness, I lost myself there in my spelling. I got it. It's the sex hormones, estrogen and testosterone, that really kind of determine where the story goes. So when we talk about estrogens, we'll see that there's faster, what we can call epiphyseal closure. And epiphyseal closure, then, we can define as when you go from the epiphyseal cartilage to epiphyseal line. And the epiphyseal line is this sort of remnant of that growth plate. The epiphyseal line is what we have left over once that area has completely ossified, completely turned to bone. So in a mature skeleton, there's no cartilage in between the epiphysis and the diaphysis. That area of the metaphysis is just bone. And so that's what we would call the epiphyseal line. Epiphyseal closure is this process of finishing that elongation. So estrogens are going to trigger that to happen at a faster pace, right? So we see individuals with estrogen are going to typically have an overall shorter stature, and they're going to achieve that mature height sooner than bodies with testosterone. So testosterone is going to have a slower epiphyseal closure. So again, you might see an individual with estrogen reaching maybe mature height around 16. Right? So for instance, for me, I have the same shoe size now that I had when I was in junior high. With bodies that have testosterone, you're going to see that that elongation is continuing, into the ages 18, 19, maybe even 21. So we'll see that testosterone is a slower epiphyseal closure, allowing for ultimately a taller body. All right, y'all, that's it for this video. Stay tuned to the next one, which is about increasing density. As always, take care of yourselves and each other.